Brevity Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story called the Bible. First up, that's what we're going to be reading. Then we are going to be reading. Then we are going to be doing the synopsis. Then you guys are going to be hitting that like button, subscribing, and hitting the bell. Then we are going to be reading Ben-Hur.
Why do they have to wait to the synopsis to hit the like button?
They don't?
Can they hit the like button now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
But they'll probably like to do it like when they're reading.
So you can hit the like button anytime you want.
Yeah.
It's okay. All right.
Yay. Who's that?
So, this is my last day. If you want me to keep it, too bad. The army won't let me. So I have to get rid of it. All right. So, we're in the book of Hebrews. We're in Hebrews chapter 9 today. Thank you, two people. I know one of them is Granny Bear. I don't know who the other one is, but thank you. Okay, Mom. Thank you for being here. Good evening to Granny Bear. Thank you for saying that. All right, this is Hebrews chapter 9, the English Standard Version of the Bible. Now even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's staff that budded and the tablets of the covenant. Having trouble reading. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second only the high priest goes, and he but once a year, and not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. Are we okay?
Yeah. We're good.
By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy places is not yet opened as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age. According to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshipper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed until the time of Reformation. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God. Therefore, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, since a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. For where a will is involved, the death of the one who made it must be established. For a will takes effect only at death, since it is not in force as long as the one who made it is alive. Therefore, not even the first covenant was inaugurated with blood, for for when every commandment of the law had been declared by Moses to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that God commanded for you." And in the same way he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the vessels used in worship. Indeed, under the law almost everything is purified with blood, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness of sins. Thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has entered not into holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly, as the high priest enters the holy places every year with blood not his own. For then he would have to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. So, I had a nice conversation today with Granny Bear about Leviticus 23, and I mean that's not the only thing we talked about, but how we might skip certain sections of Scripture because maybe they're not comfortable to read about. The book of Leviticus being a book that most people skip, but chapter 23 talks about the festivals, and the fulfillment of the festivals in the New Testament is something that is really exciting to read about, but you first have to understand the festivals and the Jewish celebration of those festivals. Well, similarly, in order to fully understand this section that we just read, Hebrews chapter 9, and actually most of this book, a proper understanding of the second half of Exodus is very helpful, where God talks about all the parts of the tabernacle. And then you understand what the holy place is, and the most holy place, and the Ark of the Covenant, and the lampstands, and all the different parts of the tabernacle, and how they relate to the to Israel. And then you can take a book like Hebrews and you can dissect it, or divide Scripture, as they say, and you can more properly understand what the author is trying to get to. So highly recommend the second half of Exodus. We're not going to read it right away, but we probably will get to Exodus eventually one of these days. All right. So Kimmy's in the other room getting her hair done, so I apologize for that, but we're going to talk about this synopsis of Ben-Hur. So, in chapter 1, Iris and Esther were like talking to each other, and they're like, Iris is, talking about how, awesome Ben-Hur is, and Esther's like, yeah, you're right. I think that, he's a pretty cool guy. And they were just like best buds, right? Iris and Esther. Oh, wait, I'm being corrected from the other room.
Say it right, or I'll correct you.
Say it right,
So,
or I'll bang like
I think Iris and Esther were like
Rivals.
what? How do they say it in Anne of Avonlea?
Bosom buddy.
Bosom friends, bosom. What is it?
Bosom friend. Oh, go JJ. You be nice.
How do they say it in?
the rivals that hate each other.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, but yeah, Iris is definitely not very nice to Esther.
Okay, you're making me walk all the way over here with my hair not even half done.
All right, here's Kimberly with the synopsis.
So Iris and Esther completely hated each other. They are more, commonly known as rivals. They're basically rivals. They're like, you know what? I'm gonna get Ben-Hur to like me better than you're gonna get him to like you. They're basically like that. Then Ben-Hur, he comes over, and he starts talking about how Jesus, he was like shadowing Jesus throughout all Jesus's travels. And so he was talking about Jesus, and Amun-Ra, their servant, kind of left.
Amun-Ra.
Amra, sorry,
Amra.
I'm speaking too fast. I'm sorry.
Amun-Ra was one of the gods of Egypt.
Sorry, I'm speaking so fast, and yeah, Amra. Sorry, it is very similar.
I guess the sound of it is Ramen-Ra.
Okay, so what
JJ
happened
says
was,
Ramen-Ra.
what happened was, she exits the room inconspicuously when Ben-Hur starts talking about how Jesus was curing lepers. And if you remember, the rest of Ben-Hur's family are lepers now.
And Amra told him that, right?
No.
She said, hey, I saw your mom and your sister and the lepers.
No.
Oh, okay.
She's probably going over to his mom and sister and saying, hey, there's this person who cures lepers. And then, yeah.
What was something else that he said that Jesus did?
Raise people from the dead, cure all kinds of diseases, like blind people, people who can't move, paralyzed people. And he also made food out of, you know the story. The
Food out of Okay, that's good.
Okay,
Good summary.
Fine. I keep forgetting if it was 5 fish and 2 bread or 2 bread and 5 fish.
It's whatever.
Okay. So, yeah, and then they had, 12 baskets of leftovers, one for each of the disciples, which actually, disciple means follower, not student. And then that's about it, right?
Okay, cool.
There's also...
Where did you learn about what the word disciple means?
Actually, in my youth group.
Oh, okay. Cool.
They kind of drilled us. They're like, disciple means...
So, all right. So she does so much better than I do because I get it mixed up. I think that Iris and Esther were friends, but they weren't really. I think that Ben-Hur, kindred spirits. That's what it is. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay, but Iris and Esther were not kindred spirits. So. And I wouldn't say they were necessarily hated each other. I think that they just didn't get along. And Iris definitely maybe saw Esther as a threat. I don't know if she even saw Esther as a threat. She may have just seen Esther as an underling. And in order to feel better about herself, she had to show off to the underling. That is a possibility. So anyway, all right. So now we're on chapter 3. The lepers leave their tomb. As you remember from yesterday, the first word is the. And let me begin. The first person to go out of the city upon the opening of the sheep's gate next morning was Amra, basket on arm. No questions were asked her by the keepers, since the morning itself had not been more regular in coming than she. The morning, oh, I see. So the morning wasn't even, she was a regular visitor, obviously. They knew her, somebody's faithful servant, and that was enough for them. Down the eastern valley she took her way. The side of Olivet, darkly green, was spotted with white tents recently put up by people attending the feasts. The hour, however, was too early for the strangers to be abroad. Still, had it not been so, no one would have troubled her. Past Gethsemane, past the tombs at the meeting of the Bethany roads, past the sepulchral village of Siloam, she went. Occasionally, the decrepit little body staggered, Once she sat down to get her breath. Rising shortly, she struggled on with renewed haste. The great rocks on either hand, if they had had ears, might have heard her mutter to herself. Could they have seen, it would have been to observe how frequently she looked up over the mount, reproving the dawn for its promptness. If it had been possible for them to gossip, not improbably they would have said to each other, "Our friend is in a hurry this morning. The mouths she goes to feed must be very hungry." When at last she reached the king's garden, she slacked her gait, for then the grim city of the lepers was in view, extending far round the pitted south hill of Hinnom. As the reader must by this time have surmised, she was going to see her mistress, whose tomb, it will be remembered, overlooked the well and Rogel. Early as it was, the unhappy woman was up and sitting outside, leaving Tirzah asleep within. The course of the malady had been terribly swift in the 3 years. Conscious of her appearance, with the refined instincts of her nature, she kept her whole person habitually covered. Seldom as possible she permitted even Tirzah to see her. This morning she was taking the air with bared head, knowing there was no one to be shocked by the exposure. The light was not full, but enough to show the ravages to which she had been subject. Her hair was snow-white and unmanageably coarse, falling over her back and shoulders like so much silver wire. The eyelids, the lips, the nostrils, the flesh of the cheeks were either gone or reduced to fetid rawness. The neck was a mass of ash-colored scales. One hand lay outside the folds of her habit, rigid as that of a skeleton. The nails that had been eaten away, the joints of the fingers, if not bare to the bone, were swollen knots crusted with red secretion. Head, face, neck, and hand indicated all too plainly the condition of the whole body. Seeing her thus, it was easy to understand how the once fair widow of the princely Hur had been able to maintain her incognito so well through such a period of years. When the sun would gild the crest of Olivet and the mount of a fence with light sharper and more brilliant in that old land than in the west, she knew Amra would come, first to the well, then to a stone midway the well and the foot of the hill on which she had her abode, and that the good servant would there deposit the food she carried in the basket, and fill the water jar afresh for the day. Of her former plenitude of happiness, that brief visit was all that remained to the unfortunate. She could then ask about her son, and be told of his welfare, with such bits of news concerning him as the messenger could glean. Usually the information was meager enough, yet comforting. At times she heard he was at home. Then she would issue from her dreary cell at break of day, and sit till noon, and from noon to set of sun. A motionless figure, draped in white, looking statue-like, invariably to one point over the temple, to the spot under the rounded sky where the old house stood, dear in memory, and dearer because he was there. Nothing else was left her. Tirzah, she counted, of the dead, and as for herself, she simply waited until the end, knowing every hour of life was an hour of dying, happily of painless dying. The things of nature about the hill to keep her sensitive to the world's attractions were wretched scant, beasts and birds avoiding the place as if they knew its history and present use. Every green thing perished in its first season. The winds warred upon the shrubs and venturous grasses, leaving to draught such as they could not uproot. Look where she would, the view was made depressingly suggestive by tombs. Tombs above her, tombs below, tombs opposite her own tomb, all now freshly whitened in warning to visiting pilgrims. In the sky, clear, fair, inviting, one would think she might have found some relief to her ache of mind. But alas! In making the beautiful elsewhere, the sun served her never so unfriendly. It did but disclose her growing hideousness. But for the sun she would not have been the horror she was to herself, nor been waked so cruelly from the dreams of Tirzah as she used to be. The gift of seeing can be sometimes a dreadful curse. Does one ask why she did not make an end to her sufferings? The law forbade her. A Gentile may smile at the answer, but so will not a son of Israel. While she sat there peopling the dusky solitude with thoughts even more cheerless, suddenly a woman came up the hill staggering and spent with exertion. The widow arose hastily and, covering her head, cried in a voice unnaturally harsh, "Unclean! Unclean!" In a moment, heedless of the notice, Amra was at her feet. All the long-pent love of the simple creature burst forth. With tears and passionate exclamations, she kissed her mistress' garments, and for a while the latter strove to escape from her. Then, seeing she could not, she waited till the violence of the paroxysm was over. "What have you done, Amra?" she said. "Is it by such disobedience you prove your love for us? Wicked woman! You are lost, and he, your master, you can never, never go back to him." Amra groveled, sobbing in the dust. "The ban of the law is upon you too. You cannot return to Jerusalem. What will become of us? Who will bring us bread? Oh, wicked, wicked Amra! We are all undone alike." "Mercy, mercy," Amra answered from the ground. "You should have been merciful to yourself, and by so doing been most merciful to us. Now where can we fly? There is no one to help us. O false servant, the wrath of the Lord was already too heavy upon us." Here Tirzah, awakened by the noise, appeared at the door of the tomb. The pen shrinks from the picture she presented. In the half-clad apparition, patched with scales, lividly seamed, nearly blind, its limbs and extremities swollen to grotesque largeness. Familiar eyes, however sharpened by love, could not have recognized the creature of childish grace and purity we first beheld her. "Is it Amra, mother?" The servant tried to crawl to her also. "Stay, Amra, the widow cried imperiously. "I forbid you touching her. Rise and get you gone before any at the well see you here. Nay, I forget. It is too late. You must remain now and share our doom. Rise, I say." Amra rose to her knees and said brokenly, with clasped hands, "O good mistress, I am not false. I am not wicked. I bring you good tidings." "Of Judah?" And as she spoke, the widow half withdrew the cloth from her head. "There is a wonderful man," Amra continued, "who has power to cure you. He speaks a word, and the sick are made well, and even the dead come to life. I have come to take you to him." "Poor Amra," said Tirzah compassionately. "No," cried Amra, detecting the doubt underlying the expression. "No, as the Lord lives, even the Lord of Israel, my God as well as yours, I speak the truth. Go with me, I pray, and lose no time. This morning he will pass by on his way to the city. See, the day is at hand. Take the food here, eat, and let us go." The mother listened eagerly. Not unlikely she had heard of the wonderful man, for by this time his fame had penetrated every nook of the land. "Who is he?" she asked. "A Nazarene." "Who told you about him?" "Judah." "Judah told you? Is he at home?" "He came last night." The widow, trying to still the beating of her heart, was silent a while. "Did Judah send you to tell us this?" she asked next. "No. He believes you dead." "There was a prophet once who cured a leper," the mother said thoughtfully to Tirzah, "but he had his power from God." Then, addressing Amra, she asked, "How does my son know this man so possessed?" "He was traveling with him, and heard the lepers call, and saw them go away well. First there was one man, then there were 10, and they were all made whole." The elder listener was silent again. The skeleton hand shook. We may believe she was struggling to give the story the sanction of faith, which is always an absolutionist in demand. and that it was with her as with the men of the day, eyewitnesses of what was done by the Christ, as well as the myriads who had succeeded them. She did not question the performance, for her own son was the witness testifying through the servant, but she strove to comprehend the power by which work so astonishing could be done by a man, well enough to make inquiry as to the fact. To comprehend the power, on the other hand, it is first necessary to comprehend God, and who he waits for that will die waiting. And he who waits for that will die waiting. With her, however, the hesitation was brief. To Tirzah she said, "This must be the Messiah." She spoke not coldly, like one reasoning a doubt away, but as a woman of Israel, familiar with the promises of God to her race, a woman of understanding, ready to be glad over the least sign of the realization of the promises. There was a time when Jerusalem and all Judea were filled with a story that he was born. I remember it. By this time he should be a man. It must be. It is. Yes, he said to Amra. We will go with you. Bring the water which you will find in the tomb in a jar, and set the food for us. We will eat and be gone. The breakfast, partaken under excitement, was soon dispatched, and the three women set out on the extraordinary journey. As Tirzah had caught the confident spirit of the others, there was but one fear that troubled the party. Bethany, Amra said, was the town the man was coming from. Now, from that to Jerusalem there were 3 roads, or rather paths, one over the first summit of Olivet, a second at its base, a third between the second summit and the Mount of Offense. The 3 were not far apart, far enough, however, to make it possible for the unfortunates to miss the Nazarene if they failed the one he chose to come by. A little questioning satisfied the mother that Amra knew nothing of the country beyond the Cedron, and even less of the intentions of the man they were going to see if they could. She discerned also that both Amra and Tirzah, the one from confirmed habits of servitude, the other from natural dependency, looked to her for guidance, and she accepted the charge. We will go first to Bethphage, she said to them. There, if the Lord favor us, we may learn what else to do. They descended the hill to Tophet and the king's garden, and paused in the deep trail furrowed through them by centuries of wayfaring. I am afraid of the road, the matron said. Better that we keep to the country among the rocks and the trees. This is feast day, and on the hillsides yonder I see signs of a great multitude in attendance. By going across the Mount of Offense, here we may avoid them. Tirzah had been walking with great difficulty. Upon hearing this, her heart began to fail. The mount is steep, mother. I cannot climb it. Remember, we are going to find health and life. See, my child, how the day brightens around us, and yonder are women coming this way to the well. They will stone us if we stay here. Come, be strong this once. Thus the mother, not less tortured herself, sought to inspire the daughter, and Amra came to her aid. To this time the latter had not touched the persons of the afflicted, nor they her. Now, in disregard of consequences as well as of command, the faithful creature went to Tirzah and put her arms over her shoulder and whispered, Lean on me. I am strong, though I am old, and it is but a little way off. There, now we can go. The face of the hill they essayed to cross was somewhat broken with pits and ruins of old structures, but when at last they stood upon the top to rest and looked at the spectacle presented them over in the northwest at the temple and its courtly terraces at Zion and the enduring towers white beetling into the sky beyond, the mother was strengthened with a love of life for life's sake. Look, Tirzah, she said, look at the plates of gold on the gate, beautiful, how they give back the flames of the sun, brightness for brightness. Do you remember we used to go up there? Will it not be pleasant to do so again? And think, home is but a little way off. I can almost see it over the roof of the Holy of Holies, and Judah will be there to receive us. From the side of the middle summit, garnished green with myrtle and olive trees, they saw, upon looking that way next, thin columns of smoke rising lightly and straight up into the pulseless morning, each a warning of restless pilgrims astir, and of the flight of the pitiless hours, and the need of haste. Though the good servant toiled faithfully to lighten the labor in descending the hillside, not sparing herself in the least, the girl moaned at every step. Sometimes, in extremity of anguish, she cried out. Upon reaching the road, that is, the road between the Mount of Offense and the middle or second summit of Olivet, she fell down exhausted. Go on with Amra, mother, and leave me here. Bless you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Go on with Amra, mother, and leave me here, she said faintly. No, no, Tirzah. What would the gain be to me if I were healed and you not? When Judah asks for you, as he will, what would I have to say to him were I to leave you? Tell him I loved him. The elder leper rose from bending over the fainting sufferer and gazed about her with that sensation of hope perishing which is more nearly like annihilation of the soul than anything else. The supremest joy of the thought of cure was inseparable from Tirzah, who was not too old to forget, in the happiness of healthful life to come, the years of misery by which she had been so reduced in body and broken in spirit. Even as the brave woman was about leaving the venture they were engaged in to the determination of God, she saw a man on foot come rapidly up the road from the east. Courage, Tirzah, be of cheer, she said. Yonder, I know, is one to tell us of the Nazarene. Amra helped the girl to a sitting posture, and, supporting her while the man advanced. In your goodness, mother, you forget what we are. The stranger will go around us. His best gift to us will be a curse, if not a stone. We will see. There was no other answer to be given, since the mother was too well and sadly acquainted with the treatment outcasts of the class to which she belonged were accustomed to at the hands of her countrymen. As has been said, the road at the edge of which the group was posted was little more than a worn path or trail winding crookedly through tumuli of limestone. If the stranger kept it, he must meet them face to face, and he did. And he did so, until near enough to hear the cry she was bound to give. Then, uncovering her head, a further demand of the law, she shouted shrilly, "Unclean! Unclean!" To her surprise, the man came steadily on. "What would you have?" he asked, stopping opposite them, not 4 yards off. "Thou seest us." "Have a care," the mother said with dignity. "Woman, I am not the courier of him who speaketh but once to such as thou, and they are healed. I am not afraid." "The Nazarene?" "The Messiah," he said. "Is it true that he cometh to the city today?" "He is now at Bethphage." "On what road, master?" "This one." She clasped her hands and looked up thankfully. "For whom takest him thou?" the man asked with pity. "The Son of God," she replied. "Stay thou here then, or there is a multitude with him. Take thy stand by the rock yonder, the white one under the tree, and as he goeth forth, fail not to call to him. Call, and fear not. If thy faith but equal thy knowledge, he will hear thee, though all the heavens a-thunder. I go to tell Israel, assembled in and about the city, that he is at hand, and to make ready to receive him. Peace to thee and thine, woman." The stranger moved on. "Did you hear, Tirzah? Did you hear? The Nazarene is on the road, on this one, and he will hear us. Once more, my child. Oh, only once, and let us to the rock. It is but a step." Thus encouraged, Tirzah took Amra's hand and arose. But as they were going, Amra said, "Stay, the man is returning." And they waited for him. "I pray your grace, woman," he said, not upon overtaking them, "remembering that the sun will be hot before the Nazarene arrives, and that the city is nearby to give me refreshment, should I need it. I thought this water would do thee better than it will me. Take it, and be of good cheer. Call to him as he passes." He followed the words by offering her a gourd full of water, such as foot travelers sometimes carried with them in their journeys across the hills. And instead of placing the gift on the ground for her to take up when he was at a safe distance, he gave it to her into her hand. "Art thou a Jew?" she asked, surprised. "I am, and better. I am a disciple of the Christ, who teacheth daily by word and example this thing which I have done unto thee. The world hath long known the word charity without understanding it. The world, hath long known the word charity without understanding it. Again, I say peace and good cheer to thee and to thine." He went on, and they went slowly to the rock he had pointed out to them, high as their heads, and scarcely 30 yards from the road on the right. Standing in front of it, the mother satisfied herself they could be seen and heard plainly by passers-by whose notice they desired to attract. There they cast themselves under the tree in its shade, and drank of the gourd, and rested refreshed. Ere long Tirzah slept, and fearing to disturb her, the others held their peace.
Hey, Dad,
Yes?
I lost my pencil. Do you know if I walked by here with it?
I don't know where your pencil is.
Come on.
I don't know why that's so important right now. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 is... Who says we go on?
Well, thanks.
Put it. On with it.
Who says we go on?
Be sure.
Kimmy says sure. Mom says me. Happy tears.
JJ says nah.
Okay, so chapter 4. Yeah, the light flashy thing is going on again, and I did read Granny Bear's message about the that's definitely better. Whoa, what just happened? Something weird just happened. Okay, I did hear read Granny Bear's message about the focus thing, but I don't know how to change it. So, all right, let's go on. We're going to read chapter 4, The Miracle. During the 3rd hour, the road in front of the resting place of the lepers became gradually more and more frequented by people going in the direction of Bethphage and Bethany. Now, however, about the commencement of the 4th hour, a great crowd appeared over the crest of Olivet, and as it defiled down the road, thousands in number, the 2 watchers noticed with wonder that everyone in it carried a palm branch freshly cut. As they sat absorbed by the novelty, the noise of another multitude approaching from the east drew their eyes that way. Then the mother awoke Tirzah. "What is the meaning of it all?" the latter asked. "He is coming," answered the mother. "These we see are from the city going to meet him. Those we hear in the east are his friends bearing him company, and it will not be strange if the processions meet here before us. I fear if they do, we cannot be heard." The same thought was in the elder's mind. "Amra," she asked, "when Judah spoke of the healing of the 10, in what words did he say they called to the Nazarene?" Either they said, "Lord, have mercy upon us," or "Master, have mercy." Only that? No more that I heard. Yes, it was enough, the mother added to herself. Yes, said Amra. Judah said he saw them go away well. Meantime, the people in the east came up slowly. When at length the foremost of them were in sight, the gaze of the lepers fixed upon a man riding in the midst of what seemed a chosen company which sang and danced about him, in extravagance of joy. The rider was bareheaded and clad all in white. When he was in distance to be more clearly observed, these, looking anxiously, saw an olive-hued face shaded by long chestnut hair slightly sunburned and partly parted in the middle. He looked neither to the right nor to the left. In the noisy abandon of his followers he appeared to have no part, nor did their favor disturb him in the least, or raise him out of the profound melancholy into which, as his countenance showed, he was plunged. The sun beat upon the back of his head, and lighting up the floating hair, gave it a delicate likeness to a golden nimbus. Behind him, the irregular procession, pouring forward with continuous singing and shouting, extended out of view. There was no need of anyone to tell the lepers that this was he, the wonderful Nazarene. "He is here, Tirzah," the mother said. "He is here! Come, my child!" As she spoke, she glided in front of the white rock and fell upon her knees. Directly the daughter and servant were by her side. Then, at sight of the procession in the west, the thousands from the city halted and began to wave their green branches, shouting, or rather chanting, for it was all in one voice, "Blessed is the King of Israel, that cometh in the name of the Lord!" And all the thousands who were of the rider's company, both those near and those afar, replied, so the air shook with the sound, which was as a great wind threshing the side of the hill. Amidst the din, the cries of the poor lepers were not more than the twittering of dazed sparrows. The moment of the meeting of the hosts was come, and with it the opportunity the sufferers were seeking. If not taken, it would be lost forever, and they would be lost as well. "Nearer, my child, let us go nearer. He cannot hear us," said the mother. She arose and staggered forward. Her ghastly hands were up, and she screamed with horrible shrillness. The people saw her hideous face, and stopped, awestruck, an effect for which extreme human misery, visible as in this instance, is as potent as majesty in purple and gold. Tirzah, behind her a little way, fell down too faint and frightened to follow farther. "The lepers! The lepers! Stone them! The accursed of God! Kill them!" These, with other yells of like import, broke in upon the hosannas of the part of the multitude too far removed to see and understand the cause of the interruption. Some there were, however, nearby, familiar with the nature of the man to whom the unfortunates were appealing. Some who, by long intercourse with him, had caught somewhat of his divine compassion. They gazed at him, and were silent while, in fair view, he rode up and stopped in front of the women. The woman, she also beheld his face, calm, pitiful, and of exceeding beauty, the large eyes tender with benignant purpose. And this was the colloquy that ensued. "O Master, Master, thou seest our need. Thou canst make us clean. Have mercy upon us. Mercy!" "Believest thou I am able to do this?" he asked. "Thou art he of whom the prophet spake. Thou art the Messiah," she replied. His eyes grew radiant, his manner confident. "Woman," he said, "great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt." He lingered an instant after, apparently unconscious of the presence of the throng. An instant, then he rode away. To the heart divinely original, yet so human in all the better elements of humanity, going with sure prevision to the death of all the intentions of men, the foulest and most cruel, breathing even then in the forecast shadow of the awful event, and still as hungry and thirsty for love and faith as in the beginning, how precious and ineffably soothing the farewell exclamation of the grateful woman. To God in the highest glory, blessed, thrice blessed, the Son whom he hath given us. Immediately both the hosts, that from the city and that from Bethphage, closed around him with their joyous demonstrations, with hosannas and waving of palms, and so he passed from the lepers forever. Covering her head, the elder hastened to Tirzah and folded her in her arms, crying, "Daughter, look up. I have his promise. He is indeed the Messiah. We are saved! Saved!" And the two remained kneeling while the procession, slowly going, disappeared over the mount. When the noise of its singing afar was a sound scarcely heard, the miracle began. There was first in the hearts of the lepers a freshening of the blood. Then it flowed faster and stronger, thrilling their wasted bodies with an infinitely sweet sense of painless healing. Each felt the scourge going from her. Their strength revived. They were returning to be themselves, directly, as if to make the purification complete, from body to spirit. The quickening ran, exalting them to a very fervor of ecstasy. The power possessing them to this good end was most nearly that of a draught of swift and happy effect, yet it was unlike and superior in that its healing and cleansing were absolute, and not merely a delicious consciousness while in progress, but the planting, the growing and maturing all at once of a recollection so singular and so holy that the simple thought of it should be of itself ever after a formless yet perfect thanksgiving. To this transformation, for such it must be called, quite as properly a cure, there was a witness other than Amra. The reader will remember the constancy with which Ben-Hur had followed the Nazarene throughout his wanderings, and now, recalling the conversation of the night before, there will be little surprise at learning that the young Jew was present when the leprous woman appeared in the path of the pilgrims. He heard her prayer and saw her disfigured face. He heard the answer also, and was not so accustomed to incidents of the kind, frequent as they had been, as to have lost interest in them. Had such thing been possible with him, still the bitter disputation always excited by the simplest display of the Master's curative gift would have sufficed to keep his curiosity alive. Besides that, if not above it, as an incentive, his hope to satisfy himself upon the vexed question of the mission of the mysterious man was still upon him strong as in the beginning. We might indeed say even stronger, because of a belief that now, quickly, before the sun went down, the man himself would make all known by public proclamation. At the close of the scene, consequently, Ben-Hur had withdrawn from the procession and seated himself upon a stone to wait its passage. From his place he nodded recognition to many of the people, Galileans in his league, carrying short swords under their long abbas. After a little, a swarthy Arab came up, leading 2 horses. At a sign from Ben-Hur, he also drew out. "Stay here," the young master said, when all were gone by, even the laggards. "I wish to be at the city early, and Aldebaran must do me service." He stroked the broad forehead of the horse, now in his prime of strength and beauty, then crossed the road toward the 2 women. They were to him, it should be borne in mind, strangers, in whom he felt interest only as they were subjects of a superhuman experiment, the results of which might possibly help him to solution of the mystery that had so long engaged him. As he proceeded, he glanced casually at the figure of the little woman over by the white rock, standing there, her face hidden in her hands. "As the Lord liveth, it is Amra," he said to himself. He hurried on and passed by the mother and daughter, still without recognizing them. He stopped before the servant. "Amra," he said to her, "Amra, what do you here?" She rushed forward and fell upon her knees before him, blinded by her tears, nigh speechless with contending joy and fear. "O Master, Master, thy God and mine, how good he is!" The knowledge we gain from much sympathy with others passing through trials is but vaguely understood. Strangely enough, it enables us, among other things, to merge our identities into theirs often so completely that their sorrows and their delights become our own. So poor Amra, aloof and hiding her face, knew the transformation the lepers were undergoing without a word spoken to her, knew it, and shared all their feeling to the full. Her countenance, her words, her whole manner betrayed her condition, and with swift presentiment he connected it with the woman he had just passed. He felt her presence there at that time was in some way associated with them, and turned hastily as they arose to their feet. His heart stood still. He became rooted in his tracks, dumb past outcry, awe-struck. The woman he had seen before the Nazarene was standing with her hands clasped and her eyes streaming, looking towards heaven. The mere transformation would have been a sufficient surprise, but it was the least of the causes of his emotion. Could he be mistaken? Never was there in life a stranger so like his mother, and like her as she was the day the Romans snatched her from him. There was but one difference to mar the identity. The hair of this person was a little streaked with gray, yet that was not impossible of reconcilement, since the intelligence which had directed the miracle might have taken into consideration the natural effects of the passage of years. And who was it by her side, if not Tirzah? Fair, beautiful, perfect, more mature, but in all other respects exactly the same in appearance as when she looked with him over the parapet the morning of the accident to Gratus. He had given them over as dead, and time had accustomed him to the bereavement. He had not ceased mourning for them, yet as something distinguishable they had simply dropped out of his plans and dreams. Scarcely believing his senses, he laid his hand upon the servant's head and asked tremulously, "Amra, Amra, my mother, Tirzah, tell me if I see straight." "Speak to them, O Master, speak to them," she said. He waited no longer, but ran with outstretched arms, crying, "Mother, Mother, Tirzah, here I am!" They heard his call, and with a cry as loving started to meet him. Suddenly the mother stopped, drew back, and uttered the old alarm, "Stay, Judah, my son, come not nearer. Unclean, unclean!" The utterance was from habit, grown since the dread disease struck her, as much as fear, and the fear was but another form of the ever-thoughtful maternal love. Though they were healed in person, the taint of the scourge might be in their garments ready for communication. He had no such thought. They were before him. He had called them. They had answered. Who or what should keep them from him now? Next moment the three, so long separated, were mingled their tears in each other's arms. The first ecstasy over, the mother said, "In this happiness, O my children, let us not be ungrateful. Let us begin life anew by acknowledgement of him to whom we are all so indebted." And at this time, I'm going to show you a picture that is in the book. We see Judah ben Hur. This is Amra down here. And this must be the mother, and this must be Tirzah. So, all right. They fell upon their knees, Amra with the rest, and the prayer of the elder outspoken was as a psalm. Tirzah repeated it word for word. So did Ben-Hur, but not with the same clear mind and questionless faith. For when they were risen, he asked, "In Nazareth, where the man was born, mother, they call him the son of a carpenter. What is he?" Her eyes rested upon him with all their old tenderness, and she answered as she had answered the Nazarene himself, "He is the Messiah." "And whence has he his power?" "We may know by the use he makes of it. Can you tell me any ill he has done?" "No." "By that sign, then, I answer, he has his power from God." It is not an easy thing to shake off in a moment the expectations nurtured through the years until they have become essentially a part of us. And though Ben-Hur asked himself what the vanities of the world were to such a one, his ambition was obdurate and would not down. He persisted, as men do yet every day, in measuring the Christ by himself. How much better if we measured ourselves by the Christ. Naturally, the mother was the first to think of the cares of life. "What shall we do now, my son? Where shall we go?" Then Ben-Hur, recalled to duty, observed how completely every trace of the scourge had disappeared from the restored people, that each had back her perfection of person, that, as with Naaman when he came out of the water, their flesh had come again like unto the flesh of a little child. And he took off his cloak and threw it over Tirzah. "Take it," he said, smiling. "The eye of the stranger would have shunned you before. Now it shall not offend you." The act exposed a sword belted to his side. "Is it a time of war?" asked the mother anxiously. "No." "Why then are you armed?" "It may be necessary to defend the Nazarene." Thus Ben-Hur evaded the whole truth. "Has he enemies? Who are they?" "Alas, mother, they are not all Romans." "Is he not of Israel and a man of peace?" "There was never one more so, but in the opinion of the rabbis and teachers, he is guilty of a great crime." "What crime?" "In his eyes, the uncircumcised Gentile is as worthy favor as the Jew of the strictest habit. He preaches a new dispensation." The mother was silent, and they moved to the shade of the tree by the rock. Calming his impatience to have them home again and hear their story, he showed them the necessity of obedience to the law governing in cases like theirs, and in inclusion called the Arab, bidding him take the horses to the gate by Bethesda, and await him there, whereupon they set out by the way of the Mount of Offense. The return was very different from the coming. They walked rapidly and with ease, and in good time reached a tomb newly made near that of Absalom, overlooking the depths of Cedron. Finding it unoccupied, the women took possession, while he went on hastily to make the preparations necessary for their new condition. That's the end of chapter 4. Chapter 5 is called Pilgrims to the Passover. The first word is Ben-Hur. And let me see if that one's super long. It is 4 pages, so I think 3.5. I think we can go ahead and do this one. Chapter 5, Pilgrims to the Passover, and then we'll call it a night. Ben-Hur pitched 2 tents out of the upper Cedron, east a short space of the tombs of the kings, and furnished them with every comfort at his command. And thither, without loss of time, he conducted his mother and sister to remain until the examining priest could certify their perfect cleansing. In course of the duty, the young man had subjected himself to such serious defilement as to debar him from participation in the ceremonies of the great feast, then near at hand. He could not enter the least sacred of the courts of the temple. Of necessity not less than choice, therefore, he stayed at the tents with his beloved people. There was a great deal to hear from them, and a great deal to tell them of himself. Stories such as theirs, sad experiences extending through a lapse of years, sufferings of body, acuter sufferings of mind, are usually long in the telling, the incidents seldom following each other in threaded connection. He listened to the narrative, and all they told him with outward patience masking inward feeling. In fact, his hatred of Rome and Romans reached a higher mark than ever. His desire for vengeance became a thirst which attempts at reflection only intensified. In the almost savage bitterness of his humor, many mad impulses took hold of him. The opportunities of the highways presented themselves with singular force of temptation. He thought seriously of insurrection in Galilee. Even the sea, ordinarily a retrospective horror to him, stretched itself map-like before his fancy, laced and interlaced with lines of passage, crowded with imperial plunder and imperial travelers. But the better judgment, matured in calmer hours, was happily too firmly fixed to be supplanted by present passion, however strong. Each mental venture in reach of the new expedients brought him back to the old conclusion that there could be no sound success except in war, in solving all Israel in solid union, and all musing upon the subject, all inquiry, all hope ended where they began, in the Nazarene and his purposes. At odd moments the excited schemer found a pleasure in fashioning a speech for that person. Hear, O Israel, I am he, the promised of God, born King of the Jews. Come to you with the dominion spoken of by the prophets. Rise now and lay hold on the world. Would the Nazarene but speak these few words, what a tumult would follow! How many mouths performing the office of trumpets would take them up and blow them abroad for the massing of armies? Would he speak them? And eager to begin the work and answering in the worldly way, Ben-Hur lost sight of the double nature of the man, and of the other possibility, that the divine in him might transcend the human. In the miracle of which Tirzah and his mother were the witnesses, even more nearly than himself, he saw and set apart and dwelt upon a power ample enough to raise and support a Jewish crown over the wrecks of the Italian, and more than ample to model society and convert mankind into one purified, happy family. And when that work was done, could anyone say the peace which might then be ordered without hindrance was not a mission worthy a Son of God? Could anyone then deny the redeemership of the Christ, and discarding all consideration of political consequences, what unspeakable personal glory there would then be to him as a man? It was not in the nature of any mere mortal to refuse such a career. Meantime, down the Cedron and in towards Bezetha, especially on the roadsides quite up to the Damascus gate, the country filled rapidly with all kinds of temporary shelters for pilgrims to the Passover. Ben-Hur visited the strangers and talked with them, and returning to his tents, he was each time more and more astonished at the vastness of their numbers. And when he further discovered that every part of the world was represented among them, cities upon both shores of the Mediterranean, far off as the pillars of the west, river towns in distant India, provinces in northernmost Europe, and that, though they frequently saluted him with tongues unacquainted with a syllable of the old Hebrew of the fathers, these representatives had all the same object, celebration of the notable feast. An idea tingled mistily with the superstitious fancy forced itself upon him. Might he not after all have misunderstood the Nazarene? Might not that person by patient waiting be covering silent preparation and proving his fitness for the glorious task before him? How much better this time for the movement than that other when, by Gennesaret, the Galileans would have forced assumption of the crown. Then the support would have been limited to a few thousands. Now his proclamation be responded to by millions. Who could say how many? Pursuing this theory to its conclusions, Ben-Hur moved amidst brilliant promises, and glowed with the thought that the melancholy man, under gentle seeming and wondrous self-denial, was in fact carrying a disguise, the subtlety of a politician, and the genius of a soldier. Several times also, in the meanwhile, low-set, brawny men, bareheaded and black-bearded, came and asked for Ben-Hur at the tent. His interviews with them were always apart, and to his mother's question who they were, he answered, "Some good friends of mine from Galilee." Through them he kept informed of the movements of the Nazarene, and of the schemes of the Nazarene's enemies, rabbinical and Roman. That the good man's life was in danger he knew, but that there were any bold enough to attempt to take it at that time he could not believe. It seemed too securely entrenched in a great fame and an assured popularity. The very vastness of the attendance in and about the city brought with it a seeming guarantee of safety. And yet, to say truth, Ben-Hur's confidence rested most certainly upon the miraculous power of the Christ. Pondering the subject of the purely human view that the master of such authority over life and death, used so frequently for the good of others, would not exert it in care of himself, was simply as much past belief as it was past understanding. Nor should it be forgotten that all these were incidents of occurrence between the first day of March, counting by the modern calendar, and the 25th. The evening of the latter day, Ben-Hur yielded to his impatience and rode to the city, leaving behind him a promise to return in the night. The horse was fresh, and, choosing his own gait, sped swiftly. The eyes of the clamoring vines winked at the rider from the garden fences on the way. There was nothing else to see him, nor child, nor woman, nor man. Through the rocky float in the hollows of the road, the agate hoofs drummed, ringing like cups of steel, but without notice from any stranger. In the houses past there were no tenants. The fires by the tent doors were out. The road was deserted, for this was the first Passover Eve, and the hour between the evenings, when the visiting millions crowded the city, and the slaughter of lambs in offering reeked the forecourts of the temple, and the priests in ordered lines caught the flowing blood and carried it swiftly to the dripping altars, when all was haste and hurry, racing with the stars fast coming, with the signal after which the roasting and the eating and the singing might go on, but not the preparation more. Through the great northern gate, the rider rose, and lo, Jerusalem before the fall, in ripeness of glory, illuminated for the Lord. Chapter 6 is called A Serpent of the Nile, and the first word once again is Ben-Hur. And I hope you are enjoying today's reading. I think that Kimberly has a picture to show us. And here she is. Oh, that's really nice. Is that the same one you drew the other day?
No.
No, it's different because the hands are in a different position. Nice. All right. So I hope you are enjoying. Here's a Beyblade that JJ wants to show us. All right. I hope that everybody's enjoying the story. Once again, this has to come off tonight. So, alas, it will not be here tomorrow. And if any, Kimmy, nice picture. That's from Granny Bear. All right. So if you, we have just a few more chapters. This is probably going to be finished in 2 or 3 more days.
Thank you, Granny Bear.
Yeah, probably 2. I'm thinking 2 more days. So we are going to be finishing, and we've already talked about what we're going to be reading next. So tune in so that you can discover that on your own. And God bless you. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow when we get to read again. All right, good night.